Hello, English learners. Welcome back to English Pods. I am Leonardo.
Whoa! Good morning, students. And I'm Elizabeth.
Today, we are diving into something a little different, like really different.
Different good or different,
Oh, definitely different good. Today, we are exploring an essential topic for anyone looking to excel in English.
Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be looking at something that I know a lot of you think about, and that is how to get better at actually speaking English.
It's a good one.
Whether you're thinking about traveling around the world, or maybe you need to give like a killer presentation at work, or even just chat with a new neighbor.
Right.
You know, feeling confident when you're speaking English.
It does. It could open up so many doors.
Absolutely, it really does. And we're diving into 3 articles that are packed with tips and tricks and even some app suggestions to help you do just that.
Right. And before we get to the apps, the thing that jumps out from all 3 of these articles is the importance of just speaking.
Yeah.
Like just actually doing it.
Yeah, it sounds obvious, doesn't it?
Right.
But the articles go a bit deeper than that, and they actually explain why active engagement is key
Okay.
as opposed to passive studying, just reading about speaking.
Got it.
So every time you speak, you're kind of like rewiring your brain, forging stronger connections that are going to make those words flow more naturally. That's a good point. So no magic pill.
No.
Just got to put in the effort.
Consistent effort, yeah.
Now, speaking of effort, finding someone to practice with is a big theme that comes up in these articles.
Yeah.
Fluent refers to it as finding your study buddy.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking, wow, that's intimidating, jumping straight into conversation with a native speaker,
Yeah.
Proply actually offers a cool alternative,
Okay.
which is chatbots.
What?
So they recommend one called Andy,
Okay.
which provides judgment-free practice so you can focus on just like the mechanics of speaking
Right.
without feeling self-conscious.
I like that, especially for people who get a little nervous speaking in front of others.
It's like a stepping stone to those more complex interactions.
Right. Okay. Well, even with a partner or a chatbot,
Sigh.
it's understandable that people might feel hesitant to speak, especially at first.
Of course.
And that's where listening comes in.
Yes.
And this is something that both Fluent and the British Council article really emphasize.
Yes, they do. And the British Council take it a step further, and they focus on how to listen effectively.
Oh, okay.
And they suggest immersing yourself in everyday English content, so things like podcasts,
Okay.
audiobooks. They even recommend eavesdropping on your colleagues,
Oh.
but maybe discreetly.
Yeah, don't get caught.
Yeah, but their advice about finding short, manageable content to listen to, I think, is gold, especially for busy people.
Yeah. I like that. Bite-sized pieces,
Exactly, fitting those moments into your routine. And speaking of immersion, did any of the pronunciation tips stand out to you?
Fluent had some really good basic tips, like vowel and consonant practice.
Yeah.
They even demonstrated some sounds.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I like that.
Breaking it down to the smallest units
Yeah.
would be really effective.
Absolutely. And then both Fluent and the Go blog recommend tongue twisters as a way to improve clarity.
Yes.
Now,
Have you got a favorite tongue twister?
I'm not very good at tongue twisters. But the Go blog makes a good point that even doing them slowly can help with pronunciation because you're consciously shaping those sounds.
You are. And that conscious effort also applies to another tip that comes up in both the Go blog and the British Council articles.
Okay.
And that's recording yourself speaking.
Oh.
I know that can be a bit daunting.
Yeah, a little scary.
It can. But think of it as like holding a mirror up to your speech patterns. You might be surprised at what you notice.
Interesting.
They emphasize how empowering it can be to actually hear yourself.
Yeah.
And self-correct those little things that you might not even realize you're doing.
It's like being your own speech coach.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. So we've talked about single words, but both Fluent and the Go blog stress that it's really important to learn phrases and idioms for a more natural flow.
Absolutely. And Friply brings this to life with some really fun examples.
Okay.
So they talk about Australian slang,
Oh, fun.
flirting phrases,
Ooh, la la.
even business jargon.
Huh.
So it reminds us that language is alive. It's more than just textbook grammar.
It is. And while we're on the topic of going beyond words, the British Council brings up body language,
They do.
which could be a whole deep dive on its own.
It could.
But for now, let's shift gears and look at some more actionable steps.
Let's do it.
Putting these tips into practice.
Okay.
All 3 of the articles have some great app suggestions.
They do.
So for those of you who like a more structured approach.
Mm-hmm.
Proply and italki are both popular for finding tutors.
Yes, and if you're someone who really wants to focus on their accent,
Okay.
Proply highlights Elsa, which is an app specifically designed for American English pronunciation.
Okay, cool. And if you're more into language exchange,
Yes.
like Fluent You describes,
Mm-hmm.
Tandem or HelloTalk might be good options because they connect you with native speakers.
Exactly. And what I find fascinating is that Fluent You recommends not just speaking in English, but actually trying to think in English.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know it can sound daunting, but they recommend starting small.
Right.
It's about gradually shifting that internal monologue.
Right.
Think of it like building a muscle,
Yeah.
Takes time and effort, but the more you practice, the easier it becomes.
So I'm picturing like mental bicep curls
I love that.
with my thoughts.
Yes, and the payoff is huge.
Okay.
Because as you become more comfortable, thinking and English speaking becomes more effortless.
Right.
You're removing that translation step in your brain.
You're cutting out the middleman.
Exactly. And another tip that I thought was great from Fluent You is retelling a familiar story in English,
Ooh, I like that.
especially like a story from your own culture,
Yeah.
because then you're thinking about how to convey the words, but also the cultural nuances,
That's cool.
which can be a really fun challenge.
It's like a puzzle.
It is.
Finding the right words.
It is. And that puzzle-solving aspect is great for language learning.
Hmm.
It forces you to be creative and think outside the box.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. What stands out to you as a big takeaway?
I think the overarching theme is active engagement.
Oh, okay.
So whether that's speaking, listening, reading, even thinking, it's about constantly interacting with the language
Yeah.
in a meaningful way.
Make it a part of your life.
Exactly. And that ties into what Preply and the British Council both say, which is practice makes perfect.
Right.
But it's not just about quantity, it's about quality of practice. So being intentional,
Right.
setting goals, and reflecting on your progress.
Got it.
So the British Council even recommend taking a moment after each conversation to analyze how it went,
Oh, interesting.
what you learned, what you could improve.
Turning those interactions into learning opportunities.
Exactly. So if we were to give our listeners just one thing to try today, what would it be?
Ooh, good question.
For me, it would be Fluent U's 5-minute thinking in English challenge.
Okay.
It's simple, it's achievable, and it gets you thinking in a whole new way.
I like it. It's accessible to anyone,
It is.
no matter your level. And who knows, maybe you'll surprise yourself.
Exactly. So to our listeners out there, I encourage you to give it a try. Set a timer for 5 minutes, close your eyes, and just let your thoughts flow in English. And even better, share your experiences with us. We'd love to hear how it goes.
Absolutely. We're all on this language learning journey together.
We are.
Now, before we jump into the last part of our deep dive, where we're going to explore even more practical tips and techniques for improving your spoken English, let's take a quick moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. We'll be right back. And we're back. I don't know about you, but I'm already feeling inspired to step up my English game.
Me too. And before we move on, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier, which was that idea of immersing yourself in everyday English.
Right.
And Fluent You had some really interesting points about the importance of vocabulary.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Constantly expanding your vocabulary.
Yeah, they had some good tips for that, like subscribing to a word of the day email.
Yes.
Or just paying attention to new words that you hear in conversations around you.
Exactly. And they make a great point about learning new words and phrases
Yes.
rather than in isolation.
So that's a good point.
So you understand how to use the word
Yes.
in context.
It's true. I remember words better when I learned them as part of a phrase.
Me too. It's like giving them a home.
Yeah.
And speaking of making things stick, the British Council had some insightful advice about using those little filler words
Oh.
that we often try to avoid, like, and.
Oh, yeah. It seems counterintuitive, but they actually make a good point.
They do.
That using them strategically can make you sound more fluent.
Exactly. Because it gives you those micro pauses to think,
Yes.
and it makes you sound more natural, less robotic.
Right, like a real person,
Exactly.
not a robot.
It's all about finding that balance.
Okay, good point. And while we're talking about sounding natural, the British Council also highlighted the importance of not being afraid to repeat yourself.
Yes.
If you're not sure the other person understood.
Yes. So much better to double check
Yes.
than to have a misunderstanding.
Right. It shows that you're engaged
Exactly.
in the conversation. Yes.
I've definitely been in situations where I've been too shy to ask for clarification,
I think we all have.
and it just makes things awkward.
It does. But remember, clear communication is key. And sometimes that means being willing to rephrase or repeat yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now shifting gears a bit, one thing that really resonated with me from the Go-Go blog was their emphasis on having fun with language,
Yes,
like making it enjoyable.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They had some wonderfully playful suggestions like singing along to songs,
Right.
doing tongue twisters, even
Yes.
giving impromptu speeches.
Wait, what impromptu speeches? That
Yes.
sounds terrifying.
It does, doesn't it?
And fun.
It's like public speaking boot camp, but with a dash of absurdity.
I love it, and it forces you to think on your feet.
It does.
Be creative.
Exactly, because in real-life conversations, you don't always have the luxury of planning out every word.
That's right.
Sometimes you just have to improvise.
You do. And speaking of real-life conversations, both the British Council and the Go-Go blog emphasize the importance of preparing
Yes.
for specific situations.
Like the cheat sheet suggestion
Yes.
from Go Blog. I love that.
Whether it's a doctor's appointment or job interview or just ordering food at a restaurant,
Right.
having those key phrases at your fingertips
Mm-hmm.
can make you feel so much more confident.
It's like a safety net.
It is.
You know, you can handle those situations.
And the great thing is the British Council actually provides a ton of helpful phrases
What?
for different situations
Oh, wow.
on their website, so you don't have to start from scratch.
That's a great resource. Okay, so we've covered a lot today, from expanding our vocabulary to embracing those filler words to preparing for specific situations. We've explored a whole range of techniques.
I think what's really striking is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
What matters most is finding what works for you and making language learning a part of your daily life.
Yes. Make it a habit.
Exactly.
Even just for a few minutes each day.
Whether it's 5 minutes of thinking in English or listening to a podcast on your commute or having a conversation with a language partner, every little bit counts.
I like that. And as you continue on this journey, remember to be patient with yourself.
Yes.
Embrace the mistakes.
They're proof that you're learning and growing.
That's a good point.
And most importantly, don't forget to have fun.
Yes.
The more you enjoy learning English, the more likely you are to stick with it and achieve your goals.
Couldn't agree more. All right, so we've talked about the importance of practice, but how do we actually do it?
Well, luckily, our sources have got some more concrete advice for us.
Okay, good.
So you remember we talked about the importance of listening.
Right.
Well, the British Council go beyond just passively absorbing the words.
Yeah, okay.
They actually encourage you to pay attention to the structure of spoken English.
You mean like how words link together?
Yes.
Use of contraction,
Exactly.
stress.
Yes, it's like they're giving us a blueprint for how natural speech actually works.
Yeah.
And once you start to recognize those patterns, you can incorporate them into your own speaking.
Okay, so how do we put that into practice?
Well, Fluently suggests a really cool exercise.
Okay.
You can take a short paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
or even just a sentence.
Okay.
Record yourself reading it at different speeds,
Okay.
and then listen back and analyze the flow.
So like,
Where do you naturally pause?
oh,
Which
yeah.
words do you rush?
Right?
It's a great way to become more aware of your own speech habits.
Yeah.
Those things you might not even realize you're doing.
Right, those little things.
And by consciously practicing at different paces, you can start to smooth out those rough edges,
yeah,
develop a more natural rhythm.
like a musical thing.
Yes.
Now, Fluent, you also mentioned a technique called shadowing.
Ah, yes. Shadowing.
I thought this was interesting.
It's where you become the shadow of a native speaker.
Okay.
So you listen to them and try to mimic their pronunciation and intonation as closely as possible,
Whoa.
almost as if you're speaking along with them.
So they recommend using videos with subtitles.
Yes, that's a great idea.
Okay.
It's like having a visual guide
Yeah.
to help you follow along.
It's a good way to train your mouth.
Yes, your ear and your mouth to work together.
Yeah.
And it can be really fun,
Yeah.
especially if you choose a video on a topic you enjoy.
Right. You're more likely to stick with it.
Absolutely.
If you're actually interested in it. You know, all this talk about making language learning fun reminds me of the Go blog.
Yes. Their advice about embracing playfulness.
Yes.
They had so many good suggestions.
Like what?
Singing along to songs,
Yeah.
practicing tongue twisters,
Right?
giving impromptu speeches on random topics,
Oh, yeah, the impromptu speeches.
public speaking boot camp
I know.
with a dose of silliness.
Right. But that silliness, I think, can be really helpful.
It can.
Because it takes the pressure off.
It does.
And it allows you to just experiment without feeling self-conscious.
It's giving yourself permission to play with words.
Yeah. I like that. And, if you can handle talking about a random topic
Yeah, good.
in front of an imaginary audience,
You're good to go.
a real-life conversation will be a breeze.
Exactly.
So speaking of real-life conversations,
Yes.
both the British Council and the Y Blog highlight something that's really practical and often overlooked,
What's that?
and that is preparation.
Yes.
It might seem simple,
It does.
but taking the time to think about the situations you might encounter
yeah.
and prepare some key phrases
Yes.
could make a world of difference.
Huge difference.
Like having those cheat sheets.
Yes, exactly.
So whether it's a doctor's appointment or a job interview or even just ordering food,
Right.
having those phrases at your fingertips
it just makes things so much easier.
takes the pressure off.
It does.
Yeah.
And you know what? The British Council actually has a ton of helpful phrases for different situations
Oh, really?
on their website, so you don't have to start from scratch.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, wow, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
From active listening to shadowing to playful practice.
Lots of different techniques.
We've explored a whole range of techniques.
And while there's no one-size-fits-all approach,
Right.
I think what shines through is the importance of finding what works for you.
Yes.
Make language learning a part of your daily life,
Right.
even if it's just for a few minutes every day.
It all adds up, right?
It does. Whether it's 5 minutes of thinking in English, listening to a podcast, or having a conversation with a language partner, every little bit counts.
And as you continue on this journey, remember to be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Embrace those mistakes. They're proof that you're learning.
They are.
And most importantly, have fun.
Absolutely. Learning English should be an enjoyable experience.
I completely agree. So to all our listeners out there, keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep that passion for language alive.
Great advice.
We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic that we know you'll find fascinating. Until then, keep those conversations flowing.